Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our Insight Region event, Ready for Kindergarten, Ready for Life. My name is Catherine Schott-Murray. I'm the current chair of the board of the Pnc Foundation for Northern Virginia. The Pnc Foundation's mission is to grow philanthropy to respond to need, seed innovation, and lead and convene the community. Insight Region, the Pnc Foundation Center for Community Research, is part of this organization's broader community leadership work. To us, community leadership rests on four foundational pillars, as seen here, that support our vision of a community that works for everyone. As grant makers in the region, we have awarded $20 million in grants and scholarships in the last 2 years. In addition to broad-based support in areas such as poverty relief, child and youth development, military personnel and their families, and mental health, our funding has supported the regional response to the COVID-19 pandemic, bolstered minority-owned businesses, seeded conversations within the community to build equity across all sectors, and most recently, supported the resettlement of Afghan refugees in the area. As you will see this morning, the data and research that is coming from Insight Region, as it celebrates its first anniversary this fall, is already changing the game for our work, driving more reliable local analytics, stronger community insights, and better outcomes. Our goal is that through this work and by partnering strategically across sectors, we will make our region more prosperous, inclusive, and strong. We welcome you to join the conversation today through the chat box and to submit questions for our panel discussion in the Q&A box as well. Before we begin today's program, I'd like to thank our silver sponsor, Brown Advisory, for its investment that supports this work. And now it is my pleasure to introduce Eileen Ellsworth, President and CEO of the Pnc Foundation for Northern Virginia, who will introduce today's program.
Thank you, Catherine. Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. During 2021, we decided to focus Insight Region on a topic we called inclusive prosperity. And under the 2020 census numbers, it turns out our region is home to more than 2.5 million residents. That represents about 30% of the Commonwealth's total population. And Northern Virginia is the wealthiest region in the Commonwealth, with a per capita annual income of almost $83,000. That figure is 39% higher than the rest of the Commonwealth and 47% higher than the rest of our nation. Along with this very high per capita income, Region 7 also has a very high cost of living. But several of the other 50 gateway metro regions in America also have a high cost of living. So how does NOVA stack up against them when it comes to the affordability and accessibility of quality preschool for our children? You know, it's jarring to realize just how early in life a child's educational success and attainment prospects are molded. So the term Ready for Kindergarten, Ready for Life is not just the title of our event today. It's pretty much an accepted truism. It's been supported by 2 decades of research and data. If you are still learning to read instead of reading to learn in 2nd grade, your academic career is in trouble. So what's happening here? Do we have quality preschool in Northern Virginia that is both accessible and affordable, especially for the families who need it the most? It is now my pleasure to introduce Elizabeth Hughes, the Senior Director of Insight Region and the author of the report we are discussing today. Good morning, Elizabeth.
Good morning. Thank you, Eileen. I'm just getting my screen set up for everyone. Yeah, so good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'll be presenting findings from our most recent report, Ready for Kindergarten, Ready for Life, and then turning it over to 2 of our local experts who can give state and local context to this issue. We'll also be then joined by our new segment that I think is really exciting, which is on community voices. So we'll be hearing directly from the parents and providers that live in this system every day. And then we'll be concluding with a panel discussion with our policy folks to dive more into these issues, and then concluding with an audience question and answer. So as you have questions throughout the presentation, please use the chat box and Q&A feature. We started our examination of this issue with the observation that Northern Virginia and the United States have a very large opportunity gap. Black and brown students here and across the country, and those from less affluent families, are more than 2 grade levels below their peer. This is an opportunity gap that likely formed well before a child ever set foot into the public school system. And research suggests that it actually remains stable or stagnant over time. That kids are neither, that this gap is neither increasing as they move through the K through 12 system, nor decreasing. What do we do about it? Preschool is actually a very effective, promising solution to this problem. It's a way to shrink the opportunity gap and support kids as they move through the system. Research suggests that children, especially those living at or near poverty, who attend a high quality program can see improved test scores, a reduced need for special education, increased rates of college going, and then by the time they're into adulthood, higher rates of educational attainment and more consistent employment. This is also obviously a very necessary investment for our working parents or for developing an inclusive economy. Unfortunately, my analysis uncovered a very startling gap. The children in Northern Virginia most likely to benefit from these programs enroll at substantially lower rates. We observed that lower income children had the second lowest rate of enrollment among the 50 most populous metro areas, and that this gap was 37 percentage points different than the higher income students. This was the largest enrollment gap in the entire country. So what do we do about this? Our report looks at 3 main drivers of this issue. We looked at the location of where families live, the cost, and then the demand for it. Let's look at location first. Scraping data from the Virginia Department of Social Services, we identified that there were 125 slots available for the children in Northern Virginia. That's about 64 slots for every 100 kids, which is an adequate level of capacity. There's also very, very deep scarcity throughout the region, particularly in the western portion, the southern portion, and then the eastern areas over to the side. So you can see from this map, the blue areas are the areas where there's very limited capacity, and some areas have what the Center for American Progress considers a childcare desert. Quality is actually a necessary element of preschool effectiveness. In order for programs to have these demonstrated impacts, they need to be of high quality. And within Northern Virginia, there's actually a deep, deep scarcity of quality. And that's not because programs are not actually of high quality, it's actually because programs have not been evaluated. When we look at this same system, the index of providers in the area, you can see that 10% of the slots are high quality, 3% are basic quality, and 87% of slots in Northern Virginia are of unknown quality. So parents really don't have a lot of information on which to base their care decisions. Maps can be really useful when there's a clear spatial pattern, and we did see on these maps some concentration of scarcity throughout the area. But a much more clear pattern emerges once we examine supply by neighborhood economic and demographic composition. We can see that neighborhoods where the median family income dips below $50,000 a year and where there's a majority minority had just 32 slots for every 100 children that were living there. This is the threshold for a childcare desert. And then as you start to gain affluence, there becomes much more availability to the point where at the $150,000 to $170,000 income level, there's about a 1-for-1 match. So there's just as many slots of childcare available for the number of young children. The next factor we looked at was cost. So can families actually afford preschool? Our report probably illustrates nothing new to the parents that live in this system, but we found that preschool is very expensive in this area. Basic quality care is estimated at $18,000 per year, which is about $1,500 per month. And a high quality program is estimated at $23,000 a year, or just shy of $2,000. This is actually a very steep rate, even for families that are earning the median family income. It's about 14 to 18% of their pre-tax income, depending on the quality of the program. But when you think about that population that we really want to serve and benefit from these programs, it's a huge portion of their income. It's 34% for basic quality and 43% for that higher quality program, leaving little room for a lot of the other expenses for these families. So clearly, lower income families simply cannot afford the market rate for childcare. What do? We found from this report that very few families in the state of Virginia, in the Commonwealth, who qualified for subsidized care actually use it. In fiscal year 2016, just 5% of federally eligible children and 9% of state eligible children received a subsidy, which was one of the lowest rates of subsidy uptake in the country among the 50 states. And this number of subsidy receipts has actually fallen over time. Instead, many parents, particularly at that lowest income bracket, are opting to do it all. In a recent national survey, they found that 34% of lower income working parents, so where all parents are working, were also serving as their child's primary caregiver. So a third of working parents are managing to juggle their workload and raising a child under the age of 5. And this has actually gone up pretty substantially with the pandemic, to the point where in December of 2020, 43% of working families that were earning less than $50,000 were also caring for their children. The last factor we looked at in our report was demand. Do families want to send their children to preschool? And it was a really interesting finding. So this national survey that I mentioned before, which was commissioned by the Bipartisan Policy Center, found that over half of parents in the United States felt that family, friend, and neighborhood care, and our speakers will talk a little bit more about what this means in a minute, is the best option for their preschool age child. So that means that it's either the parent themselves providing that care, or it's a grandparent, an aunt or uncle, a neighbor, or some other informal care arrangement. And as I think a lot of us can intuit, that this desire for informal care situations has just increased during the pandemic. Our report identifies solutions that are grounded in these 3 drivers. So we look at the location of preschool, we look at the cost of preschool, we look at the demand for it. We're recommending that opportunities to encourage provider participation in this quality assessment system. So as you saw from the map, a vast majority of providers are not participating in this system. And I believe that our speakers will talk a little bit about some of the changes that are coming in that system, but we want to encourage participation so that parents can make informed choices. We also want to look at, as we start to think about how to expand the availability and quality of programs, concentrating in those childcare deserts that were identified on the map, supporting providers as they try to increase quality by helping them purchase materials and providing training, and then understanding some of the other support systems to expand quality, including local school systems. For cost, we're interested in exploring how scholarships, subsidies, and employer benefits can support families in paying for high quality preschool. Monitoring ARPA distribution to the providers of these programs to schools in the parts of the region that are most in need of resources. Thinking about ways to support quality among providers that have lower overhead costs. So some of these are the home-based care providers that we'll hear from in a minute that maybe don't have as much overhead and can offer lower pay or lower cost care. And then helping parents understand and navigate the subsidy system and start to increase that very, very low rate of uptake. Lastly, we look at demand. So just to recall, a large portion of families would actually prefer a more informal arrangement for preschool. And if they want to do that, we want to think about how can we help resource them. So how do we provide materials to the family, friend, and neighbors that are providing that care so that they can emulate a high quality preschool at home? How can we develop subsidies and employer benefits to help offset the cost of providing that care? How can we expand programs for kids who don't attend preschool, either by choice or because of access and affordability, so that this opportunity gap doesn't become perpetuated? And then what are the actual parental preferences within Northern Virginia? We looked at national data. What are the preferences of our parents? As Eileen mentioned, this work is grounded in a broader series and focus of Insight Region on inclusive prosperity. And our hope is that as we begin to address these issues as a region, we'll start to really shape a region that works for everyone so that people can afford their basic needs, experience wealth as adults, start and grow business, and our kids enter the school system prepared for success. I'm now going to turn it over to two of our speakers today. We have Emily Griffey, who's the Chief Policy Officer for Voices for Virginia's Children, which is the Commonwealth's only independent multi-issue child policy and advocacy organization. Emily will be providing an overview of the early child care system at the state level. She's joined by Sallyann Bergh, who is the Executive Director of Fairfax Futures, a local organization focused on building collaborations, supporting partnerships, and engaging community leaders around issues related to young children's school readiness. Sallyann will be providing more of a local context. Emily, welcome.
Hi, thank you so much, Elizabeth. That was a great presentation and so much great food for thought. I'm Emily Griffey. I'm the Chief Policy Officer at Voices for Virginia's Children. And if you move to the next slide, I'll tell folks a little bit about Voices. We are based in Richmond as the multi-issue child advocacy organization, and early childhood education has been one of our topical areas since our beginning about 25 years ago. We also work in the areas of foster care and children's mental health and economic security. So we approach these policy issues from that lens of the whole child and how children and families go about their day-to-day lives and show up in these spaces where they need education and care. We're also very interested in making sure that there are equitable policy solutions for children, and that means looking at the diverse needs of children in our state and ensuring that policies are directed to meet those needs rather than other defined goals. And finally, one lens that I think provides us with a little different expertise outside of that whole child lens is that we are a neutral entity in this space. We do not operate any programs or any or have any early childhood programmatic elements in our organization. We are purely a policy and advocacy organization. And with that, we work with many early childhood advocates in Northern Virginia, folks from child care providers, home visiting organizations, within local government to get a better understanding of what is happening at the ground level in Northern Virginia and then across the rest of the state. If you move to the next slide, I just wanted to provide some context too when we're looking at this is statewide figures of early childhood education. Many of you know this, but these are a couple easy points to remember. 1 in 2 young children, so about half of young children in our state are children of color, Black, white, or 2 or more races. 1 out of every 3 children is born into an economically disadvantaged family. That's about $53,000 for a family of 4. 200% of the poverty line, and 1 in 4 children in this state are born outside the U.S. or have parents born outside the U.S. So we ground our approach in the best policies for the early childhood system in this information, in this data, to better understand how we can address policy solutions that will help children of color, economically disadvantaged children, and children in immigrant families. Next. So you really can't take a step these days without experiencing a policy change in the early childhood system in Virginia or the country as a whole. There have been many changes that were moving in the pipeline before the pandemic, And then the pandemic has also brought about a number of shifts and new investments in the system, new approaches. Many of our state policy changes were the goal of Governor Northam and the Northam administration to build a stronger early childhood system that is now coming to fruition at the end of his administration. And then other new efforts have been prompted by federal changes, federal funds in response to the pandemic as well. So a couple of the changes that we've seen recently here are the consolidation of early childhood programs at the Department of Education. Our oversight for the child care subsidy system and the funding that comes with that has shifted from the Department of Social Services to the Department of Education. Our licensing and monitoring systems are also now at the Department of Education. Those two shifts took place as of July 1 this year. As Elizabeth mentioned, there are some gaps in quality improvement and oversight and monitoring of quality. That is because we are moving to a new unified system of quality improvement called VQ-B5. Trying to say that fast, it's a tongue twister. And this is a pilot year that will move towards a system where all publicly funded early learning settings in childcare, home-based preschool programs will be a part of that new unified quality improvement system. Then most recently, starting this last April, our legislature has approved expansions of eligibility for the child care subsidy system, largely in response to the pandemic and decline in workforce participation. So now families with young children can receive child care subsidy up to 85% of the state median income, and they can receive subsidy during while they are looking for work instead of just after they receive a job. That eligibility is currently offered through the end of the year, and we will be looking to see whether we can propose some permanent policy solutions in that space with this upcoming General Assembly session, because it is temporarily expanded right now. The second area of expansion of eligibility is that the state has offered more flexibility in enrollment in the Virginia Preschool Initiative program. That is our state-funded preschool program. And there are pilots now to serve 3s and 4s and to let 5s enroll in VPI throughout the state. So many local school districts are taking advantage of that pilot to serve 3s and 4s in the Virginia Preschool Initiative. And then we'll have the opportunity this year to pilot new efforts that will help improve our system. One is a pilot for a statewide early childhood mental health consultation model that will provide early childhood behavioral health, mental health support to early childhood programs itself and the parents and the children in the systems. That pilot is beginning in the Richmond area with the hope to cost model what it would take to go statewide. And we've also approved a pilot to pay subsidy vendors, subsidy participating programs by the true cost of quality instead of the voucher system as it operates now, and look at contracts for slots rather than vouchers for participation. So we hope that will be into the works to look at how we use our child care subsidy, child care fund dollars a little bit differently. Next slide, please. So I mentioned, we really can't breathe these days without some changes coming to the early childhood system and the funding structure. Today is another day where recent news about the Build Back Better plan and what that will offer for childcare are going to mean adding additional funds into this timeline here. This timeline just shows the additional federal response dollars that have come to Virginia, the time frame that we anticipate they will be used. The CARES Act, CARISA, ARPA, it's all alphabet soup. You don't need to know the details, except for that there has been a significant federal influx already into our child care system that has helped us to expand eligibility and look at how we fund the child care system differently. The Build Back Better package includes additional funding for the child care system and state-funded preschool. So we anticipate new policy changes, new resources in both of those systems coming forward hopefully, when this bill gets out of Congress. Next slide, please. So just wanted to give you a little bit more detail on the Virginia Preschool Initiative, our state-funded program, and how the state operates our child care subsidy system. Virginia Preschool Initiative is operated by each locality and often is a mixed delivery approach, not always in a school setting, but there is a number of localities that arrange partnerships with their private providers throughout their locality. You have that in Northern Virginia as well, to ensure that there is a mixed delivery approach of public and private settings. The state provides all of the funding for the Virginia Preschool Initiative, and it is allocated on a per pupil allocation that is currently $7,600 a student. That allocation has increased over time thanks to advocates, but is still far below what we know would be the true cost to actually provide a high quality preschool program. And there is a realization that per pupil allocation and that cost is too low. The eligibility for the Virginia Preschool Initiative is about 200% of poverty, although there is some flexibility to enroll kids who don't meet that particular income threshold. And there's increasing flexibility to serve 3s and 5s, as I mentioned. And there we have several ways to ensure the mixed delivery settings are provided right now. There's a community provider add-on through the Department of Education, mixed delivery grants offered by the Virginia Early Childhood Foundation, mixed delivery preschool development grants that are a mix of state and federal funds. And then I'll add Head Start to this mix because we don't want to lose that connection between our state-funded public preschool and our federally funded Head Start programs as we look to develop a mixed delivery setting as well. And that is very much the intent of the new federal allocation for preschool, is to also ensure there is collaboration and alignment with Head Start in this system. Next slide. So for a child care subsidy, this is actually where the bulk of our funding comes into play, but there is a smaller state match here. So the bulk of the funding, especially at this time, is really from our federal allocations, from the Child Care Development Fund, as well as these additional federal COVID response funds that have come to Virginia. It is the voucher-based system, so families receive their voucher and then they choose a private setting based on their own preferences. And within those settings, you could have all different types of care. The licensed centers or families' day homes, which is largely what is included in the data that Elizabeth shared. The childcare desert data mostly looks at the licensed settings, but there are also unlicensed or registered settings like the religious exempt settings, family day home systems, and the local ordinance approved systems. Any child 0 to 12, so out of school time care, is also paid for by the child care subsidy. And largely for Virginia's history, more than half of the children participating in the subsidy system were school aged. So some policy changes have been made recently to ensure, like the eligibility enrollment, to ensure that we can get more young children into the system. Even though oversight for child care subsidy, the funding and the monitoring has moved to DSS, the front door for applications still remains within the local Department of Social Services, within the Common Help portal for families, or how they might apply for other benefits, food assistance, Medicaid assistance, and so that front door remains there. The other key with that is that for a family to choose the vendor, they must, that child care provider must have agree to accept subsidy and enter a contract with the Department of Social, with DOE, sorry, to participate in the subsidy program. So we still have a number of programs who have not taken that step to become a licensed subsidy vendor or agree to serve subsidy children. That in itself is a constraint to the choices that parents have and how we can use public funding in these settings. The other point that I just wanted to make is that Elizabeth shared that our participation in subsidy was really low prior to 2016. Since that time, the state has made significant increases in the reimbursement rates for childcare subsidy to a point where it's not bad. It's definitely being able to offer families a lot of options with the subsidy funding. We know it could certainly be more, but what you see here is an example of Alexandria's rates. Each locality has slightly different rates for the different types of settings and what a vendor would receive for a toddler in those childcare settings. So it ranges from $225 a week in that unlicensed and regulated family day home to $405 a week in a licensed childcare center. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, there's going to be lots of changes coming, lots of opportunities to weigh in on how our state system is better aligned to meet parent preferences, to meet the changing demands of the workforce, and to use these federal resources. Local governments have been provided the ARPA, the American Rescue Plan funds that could be spent in these areas. As DOE continues to align its control of these systems, they will be looking at new child care program standards and including health and safety standards and subsidy standards. We anticipate those will come to be proposed this spring and implemented sometime thereafter. And then we are looking to a new General Assembly, a new governor, a new new 2-year state budget coming up in January, where there will be more of a chance to decide how state funds are used in this area and to ensure that there continues to be bipartisan support for our early childhood system. So hopefully that covered enough ground to get you all thinking for our other panelists as well. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Emily. I'll now turn it over to Sallyann Burke to provide a little bit more of the local context in Northern Virginia. Sallyann?
Thanks, Elizabeth, and thanks, Emily, for painting just such a great landscape. I know it's a lot of details, and hopefully my presentation will help you all to see how some of those details get, actually applied here at the local level. And thanks, Elizabeth and the Pnc Foundation for having me. So my name is Sallyann Bergh. I have the pleasure of serving as the Executive Director of Fairfax Futures. And I'm just delighted to be here to share more about our work here in the community and the role that all of us can play in building a more equitable, high quality early childhood system for all families across our region. First, I just want to share a little bit of background about who we are, as we may be new to some of you. We are a 501c3 nonprofit. We were launched in 2004. So we are in about getting ready to round out our 17th year of working here in the community. And our vision is that Fairfax County prioritizes and invests in the success of every child and youth to foster a thriving community. And our overall mission is that we work through partnerships to catalyze that community-wide action and change so that all children and youth can achieve their full potential. Now, that's a tall order. When you look at the landscape of early childhood, at least here in Fairfax County, and obviously across the region, the numbers are even larger. But here in Fairfax County, there are about 72,000 children that encompass that birth through 5 years. You can go to the next slide, Elizabeth. And so that's ambitious. If we're going to reach all the children and ensure they have high quality access to early care experiences, we have a lot of work to do. But we are paving the way for young children through our early childhood programs. So currently, this data is just a couple of days fresh. We have over 1,350 state licensed or county permitted family child care programs here in the county, and we have over 550 licensed child care centers. Now these programs include children through the age of 12, childcare centers here in this number encapsulates the SAC programs as well, which is the school age childcare program. But you know, we have great programs, and currently over 40% of these programs are participating in the subsidy program. So that might help to paint the context, especially with what Emily just laid out around the details behind subsidy, that there are a good number of programs that are participating, but we can talk more about what that might look like if more were to join the program. But I do want to point out that families serve as the base for children's acquisition of values, traditions, ethics. So we don't want to discount the role of families in our community, but the work we do is really to lift the early childhood educators to demonstrate how their role is so important in partnering with families. You know, it's really a joint effort. Families come to the table with their ideas. They know their children best, but educators can be a huge support in that process. And educators are a big, important piece of the puzzle to ensure that we are promoting children's school readiness, that they are ready to enter kindergarten, socially and developmentally ready. That we know during the pandemic that has been a challenge, but early childhood educators have been working through the pandemic and really filling a lot of those gaps when the schools were closed for a period of time. A lot of providers in our community did remain open and are continuing. Those that did close, more and more are continuing to reopen. So that's really great news. But what we do here at Fairfax Futures is we work through the educators to ensure that we are providing them with access to high quality early learning developmental opportunities. So we're supporting their professional journey to ensure that they're having, you know, they are gaining their own skill sets, they're growing in their competencies as educators so that they can offer the best teaching to the children that they care for every day. And these are just some snapshots of some educators in the community and a photo of one of our early learning programs. When it was in person, we've been doing a lot virtual, obviously, but we do hope to get back to in person soon. So as Emily and Elizabeth laid out really clearly, we know that early childhood education can't kind of work in a silo because it is a top priority for our nation, our state, our local government, our local community, but it's not up to any one entity alone to solve the challenges. So I want to point out that we work in partnership with the local government to ensure we're reaching more educators and families. Specifically, the county's Office for Children, which is housed in Neighborhood and Community Services, is a primary partner for the work that we do. OFC, many of my colleagues are here on the phone, grateful to them for their expertise and their support in the work that we do. I partner with them. They help us to support our programs in the community, really to extend the reach that we're able to do with the philanthropic dollars that we raise. We also partner with Fairfax County Public Schools more informally, but we engage with them because we want to understand what's happening at the school level with the pre-K programs. They are an important piece to the puzzle, and they have a set of expertise that can help us to continue to refine our programs and opportunities, and many of their teachers participate in our programs as well. So a couple of guiding principles and next steps. There are a number of resources online, and Emily, maybe the Pnc Foundation can share these with you later, but a couple of resources to point out. The Fairfax County Equitable School Readiness Strategic Plan was developed in 2017, and this plan really serves as our roadmap for Fairfax Futures and for the Office for Children. And even the schools has a role to play in some of this as well, but it's really a roadmap and a vision to helping us ensure that in all that we do, we are serving young children in Fairfax County and ensuring that they have the supports needed to be successful in school and beyond. So as that, the work, the plan, the strategies in there continue to evolve, and we look forward to, as we continue to move forward, how we continue to ensure we're reaching all children and families. That plan was developed in 2017. And that same year, the One Fairfax policy was also created. Many of you are probably aware of that piece of that resolution, but it does include early childhood education as a key pillar to promote equity. So I encourage you to take a look at everything that is there. And over the last year or two, especially during the pandemic, the issue of childcare, early childhood education has really risen to the forefront of the news. And the county has recognized that we can't ignore it. There's still work to be done. So the county's strategic plan, the chairman's task force on equity and opportunity, and the county's economic recovery framework are three important pieces that do define and lay out strategies for how do we address the challenges around early childhood education. A lot of it is working directly with educators in the field to ensure their professional development continues to grow and evolve, as well as working with families and ensuring we're providing those equitable opportunities for everyone. And then we have the role of philanthropy. So the Pnc Foundation knows this well. You are a prime player in this space and for our community. But the nonprofits like ours that are small and large nonprofits, we all rely on philanthropy to do our programs and to do them well, and to have the feedback and to develop metrics in partnership to ensure our work continues to build the longer term system and make improvements. So this is just a snapshot of some of our current funders and some more recent funders. And I wanted to just call out a couple of our projects, our programs, just to give you guys a little bit of context as far as the type of work that we do in the community. So the Meyer Foundation, we had a really interesting project that we completed in 2020. Our task for that work was to field test the county's equity lens. So we had a school readiness equity lens that was crafted. A number of partners came together to craft this tool, and we really wanted to see, well, how do you apply a lens into the field? So we targeted a community. We looked at the Bailey's Crossroads community. We had opportunities to interview local nonprofits, school-based leaders, parents, educators, and really learn from them. What do they, what does access to early childhood experiences look like for you, for your family, for the kids you serve? What are the challenges? We have an extensive report. You can go on our website and read more about that. But basically the outcome of that was the creation of a simplified equity lens, just a really quick tool. There's more meat to it, but it's a nice way to really go through different steps and strategies to help inform decision-making around what families are looking for. What do they really desire for their children? And a really interesting, cool piece of that is that this lens has now been applied across the county's Office for Children, and my colleagues have been applying it to specific projects and initiatives that they work on. And it's really helping us to dig deeper and understand, how do we really walk the walk, talk the walk, walk the walk around equity. So it's a work in progress, but that initiative helped us to get the starting point, get our legs going. And then I want to just share the Pnc Foundation is another primary supporter of ours. They fund our annual school readiness symposium, and that is an annual event that reaches, with the pandemic, we've been able to reach upwards of 500 educators. And it just is a way to give back to the community, to offer them high quality speakers and opportunities to really learn and network with their peers. And then the last project of many more that you can learn about on our website, but we are through the John and Janice Wyatt Foundation this year, we launched a Child Development Associate Mentoring Program. And the CDA is a credential that educators can earn, can acquire. And it really, by doing so, it really helps them to grow in their field, to it's really a recognition of their commitment to growing as an educator and helping them with their career pathway. So we have 45 educators working on attaining that CDA credential, and we have mentors that are working in partnership with them and really supporting them along that journey. So those are just a couple of our on the boots, on the ground projects that I hope can help you to understand how we're serving the community a little bit more. And then the last piece I just wanted to draw your attention to is how we connect to the business community. In 2019, we launched what we are calling our Nova Business Alliance for Early Childhood Education. And we are in the process of revitalizing, really identifying what is this group going to be in our community? How do we serve the group, and what are the benefits for businesses joining a group like this? So we are more to come, but just a little teaser. We are getting ready to plan an event early in the new year where we may have some more updates around the state of early childhood education. Emily and Elizabeth, as you can see, there's a lot more to come at the state and at the local level. So that will be a great opportunity to come back and join us and get involved. And I just want to thank, we have a board of directors, as most all nonprofits do. And these are members of the business community, government, higher education, businesses of all types, of all sizes, women-owned, minority-owned, small, bit large. So we're small but mighty. And if this is a shameless plug, but we're always looking to bring new partners on board. So if you have interest in learning more about our mission and vision and getting involved at the local level, we'd love to hear from you. And that's all for today, but I really thank you all for joining and look forward to the conversation.
Great. Thank you so much, Sallyann. Before we begin our discussion, we wanted to hear from the community, the providers, parents, and organizations that live in and navigate this system every day. Unfortunately, given the time of this webinar, many of them are actually providing that care or transporting their children, so we've pre-recorded a video.
Hello, my name is Tanya Miller. I'm a daycare provider with infant toddler family daycare for the past 12 years. I've worked as an early childhood educator in Fairfax County for 10 years and in Prince William County for the last few years, caring for children from birth to 5 in my home. The main issues surrounding childcare, in my opinion, are the same as they've always been: lack of equitable and affordable care. COVID has just amplified the problem. However, it's always been present. When I first started looking for care, I realized I could not afford the fees. I found infant toddler family daycare, and despite the fact that I couldn't afford the rates, they helped me to start my own business, provided training and support throughout. I had the best of both worlds. I was able to make an income in my home, care for my own children, provide quality care for other parents who were having the same difficulties that I was finding quality care. We know from research that if we invest in early childhood education or early childhood educators, it will pay off and yield astonishing results. I've interviewed with lots of parents, preschool parents, who would have liked to enroll in my program. And though I offer discounts, they still cannot afford the fees. And I understand that childcare is costly for parents, but as daycare providers, we barely make enough to make ends meet. To make a livable wage, we have to operate at maximum capacity. And since the pandemic, it has been very, very difficult. As I previously stated, I started my daycare because I was unable to find affordable care for my children. One of my children, now a senior in high school, is making more per hour than I make working in a popular coffee shop. I have a friend who turned down a promotion because she could not afford to take a pay raise, a very, very small pay raise. That would mean that she would probably lose her benefits, or she would not be eligible for subsidy. She would struggle more than she struggled before as a result of that, a slight pay increase in her salary. She didn't turn down the promotion because she didn't desire anything better for herself or her family. She had no other option. It's past time for us to invest in early childhood workforce, make it more equal and accessible to everyone. Invest so that self-employed childcare educators enjoy the same benefits as teachers, such as paid leaves, health insurance, and retirement, so that early childhood educators like myself who are planning to leave the field will not leave the field. We will stay because we love what we do. But why are we leaving the field? I'm going back to school because I would like another degree so that I can work in the school system where I can get benefits. Childcare providers are not afforded these benefits. And so oftentimes we are leaving this workforce, what we love to do, this profession, to go to do other jobs because we simply need benefits. We know that childcare is important. We understand, and it's about time everybody around us begin to support us and do what's right. Invest in the future. Invest in our children.
Hi, I'm Carol Liske, Executive Director of Main Street Child Development Center. We are a nonprofit organization having served Fairfax families of primarily low income and wonderful diversity for the past 50 years. We provide high quality, comprehensive early childhood education and support services, believing that it is the single best way to make the future for our community better than the present. So how do we ensure that our children get these quality services and the quality support and that it's affordable for their families? Well, here's our experience in Main Street and where we have some obstacles. First, it's affordability. Families still don't find childcare to be affordable, even though we offer subsidies. The government offers pretty generous subsidies. But oftentimes, families find themselves having to make a decision between making a car payment or a rental payment and paying their child's education, or even something as small as buying a pair of shoes and paying their portion of their child's tuition. Still is not quite affordable enough for so many families, and that's why so many have their children in the care of an aunt or an uncle or a grandma. Another issue is that it's complicated and difficult to navigate the enrollment and registration. When you enroll and register with the county, there are tons of papers you need to fill out and a lot of information you need to provide. And a lot of our families are very hesitant to provide all of that information and frankly find it just overwhelming to navigate the system and then to wait for 30 days before they can actually get their child into a child development center. Another issue is quality. And without quality, we don't have much of anything. It means everything. So we've got to have very high quality teachers. They've got to be prepared and professional and compensated appropriately. And we need enough teachers because we need those small ratios. Like at Main Street, we have 6 children to 1 teacher. That gives the children those rich interactions, relationships, and small group instruction that is so very effective. We also need special services for our families. Our children need, like I said before, mental health, special ed services. Those things cost and are so very necessary. And of course, the families need supportive services. We need people like our family service coordinator who can help guide them and develop those trusting relationships so many need. So if we're going to do this, we need public input. We need private organizations to help us out. We need to do this all together so that we can build a fulfilling and promising future for our children. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Erin Foley, and I'm a mother with 3 young children here today to share my experiences with searching, obtaining, and receiving affordable childcare in Northern Virginia. My journey started back in 2010 when I gave birth to my first child. At the time, I did not know anything about a child care assistance program. From 2010 to 2012, I paid $408 a week, more than I earned in a week, to a large child care company. After my ex-partner lost his job in late 2012, he watched our daughter until mid-2013 when he found another job. At that time, after becoming pregnant with my second child and already knowing a rough estimate of what child care would cost, which would be between $250 to $408 a week after contacting various centers and receiving quotes, I decided that I would work evenings and take care of my daughter and eventually newborn son during the day. From 2013 until mid-2014, I worked from 6 p.m. until 2 a.m. full-time while pregnant, and then watched my daughter and newborn son during the day. It was physically and mentally taxing, and although I was saving some money, I felt like a stay-at-home mom who also worked a full-time job, having to juggle a graveyard shift for work while caring for my children all day because I could not afford $200 to $400 per week per child for childcare. In 2013, I was able to obtain 2 spots with Main Street Child Development Center through the Fairfax County Office for Children Child Care Assistance Referral Program. I learned about the program through the Fairfax County Department of Social Services. From 2013 to present, my children and I have been in the Office for Children Daycare Assistance Referral Program for Main Street Child Development Center, as well as SAC. To say being relieved to be accepted into the program is an understatement. Being accepted into this program allows me to stay working full-time, have the children receive quality childcare, and for me to have breathing room paycheck to paycheck. However, the hero of my story is Main Street Child Development Center. I've never experienced a more caring, curriculum-based, and affordable school than Main Street. The teachers and staff are exceptional, and they really walk the walk in demonstrating how high-quality, affordable childcare can be run at a center. Throughout the years, I've seen my children blossom and be not only ready for kindergarten, but excited for it through the hard work of the Main Street staff. I do think the bigger conversation is not only parents being able to obtain affordable childcare, but quality, affordable childcare where the staff at these facilities are well compensated and appreciated for their work they do, which in my opinion is one of the most important jobs in the world: nurturing, guiding, and teaching the next generation. I also believe more outreach in the community by letting parents know about affordable childcare options is key. My hope is that forums like this, as well as continued discussion where parents, teachers, administrators, and elected officials can collaborate for high quality, affordable childcare, will make this dream a reality for many children in Northern Virginia. Thank you for your time.
My name is Michelle Sullivan, and I was asked to participate in today's webinar as the Executive Director of All Ages Read Together, or ART. ART provides free preschool to low-income children in need in their communities, and we serve children that fall just outside the income guidelines to qualify for Head Start or VPI, but come from families that can't afford the cost of private preschool. We are an hour-and-a-half long program, 2 days a week, and we operate out of in-kind space directly in our families' communities. So we are in affordable housing, libraries, community centers, senior centers, and there is an aspect of our program that I think is extremely unique and relevant to today's conversation, and that is our outreach component. Our assistants go out into the community and conduct relationship building with these families and let them know about the program and the idea that we want their children to start prepared for kindergarten on day 1. We also let them know about Head Start and VPI because if they qualify for those programs, we make sure that we refer them to apply. I think this is really important because from where we stand, finding all of the students who qualify for VPI provides challenging to the administrators. There isn't a seamless system of identifying children in need, and there really needs to be a robust system in place to find the children who qualify for the program. There also needs to be an adjustment in the VPI income requirements to give families the ability to participate. As I noted, we serve families in affordable housing. There are a number of our families who qualify for affordable housing but do not qualify for VPI. Everyone that lives in affordable housing should be able to secure a spot for their child in the VPI program. And it's just not the case as it currently stands. I was also asked to explain how long I have been in it. I've spent my career focused on poverty law, education law, and disability civil rights law. But I think my story is deeper than that, in that I came from a single parent household when I was a young child. My mother scraped together enough funding for me to attend preschool. I went on to college and to earn a law degree. But my parents, my mom went on to remarry a patrol officer who earned $18,000 a year, which we lived on for several years during my elementary school years. But they both went on to further their educations. My dad became chief of police and was the youngest in the state of New York for some time. And my mom went on to become a special education educator. Our story is not unique to the families that we serve in the art program. And so I thank you all for caring about Virginia's young students and helping us advocate for a workable system for all of Virginia's children. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much to the parents and providers that shared their perspective and passion and insights into this topic over video. We're sorry that we couldn't have you here in person. I'd like to now turn to our panelists, Emily and Sallyann, if you want to join me back on video. Thanks for joining us today. There's a lot to unpack. It's a huge topic, and I thought we'd just start this discussion with the laundry list of questions that I still have about the early childhood care system, even after researching and poring over the data. And then we'll have about 10 minutes at the end, hopefully, for audience questions, if there are any. So audience members, please use that Q&A box at the bottom. I'll start with you, Sallyann. You mentioned during your presentation that we can't ignore the early child care system anymore. Can you talk about why? Why is the system critical now in particular?
Yeah, thanks. I keep getting your names mixed up, Emily and Elizabeth. It's an important question. This is really the breadth of what we're talking about today. You know, a lot of times people say, well, why should I care now? The benefits are like way into the future, but really the benefits are now. I was on a webinar yesterday with Virginia Early Childhood Foundation, and one of the speakers said that if we don't, I'm not going to get it exactly right, but if we don't solve the childcare system, you know, the challenges that we have currently, then we're not going to ever solve the workforce issues either. So it really goes hand in hand. If we have a strong early childhood system, then we're really building a stronger workforce, both our current workforce for employees who are, you know, young parents especially during the pandemic, trying to get back to a normal state of going back to the office or having, you know, that opportunity to be more focused with their career. But also we're investing in the future for the young children that, you know, are part of the early childhood care system. Those benefits you mentioned, Elizabeth, are huge. I mean, children go on to achieve higher levels of education, to have higher paying jobs, to stay out of the criminal justice system. There are so many elements there that we could unpack. So really it's a win-win. I mean, whether you have children or not, investing in the system is really supportive to grow our entire community and make our community a better place.
Emily, anything to add there, particularly from a state perspective about why this system is critical to focus on now?
Yeah, so I'll add just two thoughts here. And one is that from the child perspective, we need to recognize that children are learning wherever they are. And so that is what is the key element, I think, of the early childhood system, and breathing and blending together what parents are doing, what family, friend, and neighbors doing, what childcare providers in the field are doing, what schools are doing, is that in all of those settings, kids are going to be learning and growing and developing and experiencing, and we need to bring high quality opportunities and interactions into all of those settings. And so that, I think, is what is so important about looking at our system across the board and holistically. And the second thing that I'll add is that I think this is now is the opportunity to make sure that we're defining that with our vision for a unified system, that we are saying that the family, friend, and neighbor, the family day home, the parents themselves should have a key stake in defining what that early childhood system looks like for them, and that we ensure that that is happening at the local level and the state level as well. And so appreciate, all of the folks in Northern Virginia who do such an amazing job of collaborating together and, hearing the parents' perspective. And, when you hear stories like Tanya's and the work that Carol has done and Erin, it really demands that folks who are involved in the system itself, the parents and the providers, are a part of the solutions and defining what this looks like moving forward too.
Yeah, and I was really interested to hear from those parent provider testimonials how frequently the topic of quality came up. And I know it's Emily, you mentioned, and it's part of the report that the state is implementing a new quality system where it's going to have different requirements around it. It's going to have different thresholds than what we have currently. And so a big portion of the report is talking about quality. It's also talking about cost. And I keep thinking, how does it work? If we're already market rate at $18,000 and the estimate is that if quality care would cost $23,000, that's going to vary by jurisdiction. How do you make that work? How can providers find a way to offer higher quality care or care in general and make it affordable?
Well, I would say that works with just putting more money in the system. We have to solve the problem that parents can't afford to pay anymore and providers can't afford to earn any less. And so what that comes from is additional public investment to treat childcare and early learning like a public good, like education as well. And so I do think that momentum is building with what we've seen in terms of the federal investment into the childcare and preschool space. We'll hopefully see from the Build Back Better investments too. But we have to ensure that the ultimate goal is that providers and early educators are earning more and parents are paying less. And that we build quality into that system, of course, but that is going to take a significant investment in order to shift those balances there.
If I could just add on to what Emily said, I mean, the first educator who spoke talked about the need for educators to have benefits, and that also ties in with the, earning a living wage. I mean, Northern Virginia is an expensive place to live, even for higher income earners. And if we don't, we have to find a way to somehow incentivize educators, new early childhood educators, to enter the field and current educators to stay in the field. And I mean, it's not like this is a new challenge. It's been here, but I think the pandemic has certainly elevated it. And if you look at, recent news articles, there are stories out there of educators leaving the field. This isn't just a Northern Virginia problem, this is across the country, but leaving the field to go work at Dunkin' Donuts or Starbucks or places where they can make a higher hourly, wage. And that's, not to take anything away from anyone that works in those other places, but an early childhood educator's job is hard work and requires skill sets and expertise. And that it makes me really sad that is what is happening in some areas. So we want to keep committed educators there and encourage them and build those career pathways and incentivize them and encourage them to. So that is in many ways what we are trying to do at Fairfax Futures with our CDA mentoring program and other initiatives that will hopefully have more long-term impacts on the field.
Yeah, so cost was one of the factors we looked at in the report, and the other one was location and general accessibility. Can either of you talk about the importance of physical proximity? So why does a family need care in the neighborhood, and why is that a benefit to have it proximate?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in. I mean, the region, Northern Virginia is a huge geographic region. Fairfax County alone is a very large county. So I know personally, for me, it takes me 45 minutes to drive to the office. I live in Arlington, I work in Fairfax. So you have to budget at least 30 minutes to get anywhere, maybe longer. So, if I put myself in the shoes of maybe a single mother with 3 or 4 kids, and she's trying to figure out, how do I get 2 kids to childcare and 1 kid at the school, and I work over here, and I don't have a vehicle, maybe, you compound all of these extra layers, things that many of us take for granted, having a car to jump in and go. Public transit is decent, but even so, that's going to double the amount of driving time. Then you got to do it all over again at the end of the day. So just the stress of that piece, having, encouraging childcare settings, early childhood programs that are of high quality in various parts of the county, in various parts of the region, that families can access close to where they live would definitely be a huge support. How we ensure we connect families to those programs, that is maybe where we have to kind of deploy resources or make sure we're able to reach families in ways that they not just putting something on a website, but encouraging them to learn more, whether it's a resource fair, offering resources in their native language. We have a very diverse population. So there are a lot of challenges. And if we want to ensure early childhood is equitable, there are a lot of, location is just one piece of that puzzle.
Yeah, Sallyann, I think that's a really important point that we've talked about access up to now around location and physical proximity, but there's access in terms of language and information and understanding systems. And then, Emily, you and I have talked a lot about access of hours and work schedules, that if you have, and one of our parents talked about this too, that if you're working odd hours or odd jobs, it's very, very difficult to find care through these formal systems. It's hard to exist. So even if you qualify and can use a subsidy, that's another barrier. That's another access barrier that's hard to untangle.
Yeah, and so I would just add there, I mean, I think as we build this system, we need to also recognize the value in the cultural competence, the language access of some of these informal networks as well, that can be a strong value and quality indicator to many families, is ensuring that there is that connection to their preferences, to the things that they want their family to know and understand. So I think that is really key about one of the issues of bringing quality to wherever kids are. And so I also just want to frame that as when those systems are building up, what's important is that we don't try to eliminate providers from those systems, right? That we create a wide enough entree into those systems, including language access, types of degrees that are required. Many people born outside of the US do not have a high school diploma or other things. So ensuring that those pathways to care, to participating in the system, are accessible to the providers, and as we know that exists in the community, and that can be a really good fit for families too.
I'm curious if either of you have more insight into what parental preferences are locally or in the state. Have we learned anything from some of these listening sessions or chatting more with the parents and providers about where preferences are in terms of the continuum of care or what they want in terms of quality?
I mean, it's a good question. I don't have like ongoing access to have those conversations with families, but one thing I think we can probably all agree is that as businesses, for example, do start to reopen, those preferences to find a place where my child can have a safe, nurturing, high quality learning experience will, should be on the rise. Many families, as you mentioned in the report, Elizabeth, during the pandemic, wanted to keep their children at home, which makes complete sense with the pandemic. So I think we'll have to give it a little bit more time and see. But in the meantime, there are plenty of opportunities where we can educate families through various networks about the resources that are available and allowing them, this is, at the end of the day, it's a family's choice whether they want to put their child in a formal preschool or early childhood program or, do the family, friend, and neighbor care. We don't want to take anything away from a family's decision to go one way or the other. They should typically know their child best, but we want to ensure that, I think Emily had mentioned, that we can provide resources and opportunities to ensure that no matter the setting a child is in during the day, it is high quality and they're getting their needs met from a social and emotional, developmental perspectives, so that that gap doesn't get larger before a child enters kindergarten. So I didn't quite answer your question, but I think time will probably tell. But there are opportunities, different business sectors are going to look a little different for those preferences too. And like Emily said, the different hours of work play a role. I mean, if you're in a healthcare system, a lot of healthcare providers are allowing staff to kind of flip their hours, work a night shift instead of the day shift, if that's going to help with being able to provide a care setting for your child. But not every work setting has that flexibility. So I think it's also on the part of businesses and to kind of help in that process too.
Emily, anything to add here about parental preferences and what we know? You and I have talked a little bit about how the pandemic has even shifted some of those. We're seeing it in national data, but any insights statewide?
Yeah, I would say really to have conversations with parents to ensure that there is a feedback loop in place for policymakers and others to better understand these preferences as we look to new developing state systems, things like the Ready regions that will help align the state government, local government, and different partners. Having those conversations now to understand where parents are fitting in and feeling, I think makes a big difference. So I think that ensuring that there are those mechanisms in place for families to feel supported and that they can give that feedback as part of our work as advocates, as folks who are in this field. So that and should be part of this question of like, where is the consumer demand? As a parent, many of those things are going to weigh into. It's going to be very individualized. Like, where is your older children? How many kids do you have? Where is your job in comparison to your childcare options? And so, getting a better sense from a wide variety of folks, I think, is the key element there.
I have one more question about parental preferences, and then we'll turn to some of the questions from the audience. But as we reflect on this national data, that a lot of parents do want to care for and educate their children at home, their preschoolers, their infants and toddlers, and that data is saying not based even on equally accessible and affordable options. Are there systems in place, or do we need to think about designing systems and resources to support that preference for how a family can afford to live here and also to care for and educate a young child?
Sallyann, I don't know if you have some NOVA examples specifically, So there are some staff family child care networks and also family friend and neighbor networks. We don't have strong support of either of those networks from the state level, but there are models that exist. In particular, Homegrown is one of the national models that exists to support family friend and neighbor care. There's another initiative that has started in some early Virginia, funded through the Virginia Early Childhood Foundation, called Wonder School, that helps family day home providers start new businesses and start family day home networks. I think the example that you all have in Infant and Toddler Family Day Connection, Lynn and Tanya, who were part of that, is a great example of providing that sort of back end support to somebody that's going to provide a childcare program out of their home, and can really help people connect to the professional development and quality resources. So we'd love to see more expansion of those networks throughout the state as well. With all of the new funding and changes, I think there's a lot of policy opportunity to make that happen. I think that there also needs to be some rising increase of voices from demand and expectation that this is what it should look like in building out the future system as well.
Also, from the perspective of supporting families in this process, the county, who we partner closely with, we do have some funding to hire a family partnerships coordinator position. So that position, along with other pending future projects that we want to work on, we really want to find ways to understand how educators do partner with families, and what are the best practices in the field. And with this new unified early childhood system, that's going to be a large component of measuring quality in programs. What are the adult-child interactions, the adult being the educator, and then also how do the educators engage and partner with families? So potentially creating resource hubs or other opportunities for families and educators to come together and be able to have that, pooled, shared support, so that they can, it doesn't just fall on, the government or the nonprofits or the businesses or philanthropic community to do it, but we want to also empower educators and families to also take that step to growing in their knowledge of child development, and recognizing that, we're all in this together, and to make the system stronger, those types of, we have to find opportunities to connect them. So if we can kind of build some foundational pieces, I think over time, there will be really great opportunities for families of all types, not just families with children in the formal programs, but also in informal care settings to access those types of resources. So more to come.
So we're getting a number of questions in the chat and Q&A about affordability, which is natural. So Eileen is our president and CEO is asking about the subsidy system. Very, very low uptake, at least historically, very, very comparatively to other states. Low uptake even over time. Can you talk about how challenging or how families navigate the subsidy system and what sort of improvements are needed? And then also for families that are ineligible for that resource, if there's other options available for those families that don't yet qualify.
You want to take that one, Emily?
Sure, I'll deciding on that one. It's a difficult question. So one thing will be the eligibility for the child care subsidy. It's also called child care assistance. People in policy probably more refer to it as subsidy. From the parent perspective, it's actually called child care assistance. And I think the key is getting folks to remove some of the barriers to participation, to know that these increased eligibility rates, is in effect now. So if you know any family and they're worried about whether they want to be approved for subsidy, make sure that they apply before the end of the year in case that eligibility doesn't stay at a higher level. the continuing that flexibility for job search. We removed the child support enforcement criteria, which kept many families from participating, that if they were that the non-custodial parent had to be part of the formal state system for child support in order for them to receive that benefit. So we've removed a number of barriers. We want folks to participate. The hardest thing, I think, is making sure that there are a good match between the programs accepting that subsidy and the families that need a space. And we really need to find some more systemic elements to help those providers onboard into the subsidy system and to remove barriers for the providers to participate as well, and to see the value of what they're going to get. Somebody mentioned in one of the questions, you get paid on a reimbursement basis. So that first month that you're providing subsidy care for kids, you're not necessarily getting an income. Can there be other than local solutions, other ways to help provide that buffer time frame? We've also been, had this stop and start of money from the CARES funding, from the American Rescue Plan funding, that has been easier for some of the larger programs to navigate than the smaller programs to navigate. So we're also in a time frame right now where there hasn't been additional support to the childcare sector. I think the last grants were maybe made May or June for a period of time. They're not going to get another chunk of assistance until December at this point. And so we keep having some stop and start instability, I think, for the overall sector, that abilities like contracts and grants can help even out rather than some of these payments that have come and stopped and started. I know the state is very much interested in tackling these changes to the child care subsidy system with the alignment at DOE. So there will be a number of opportunities to look at changing how we pay, who could come on board, and who can access these the child care assistance in the coming year too.
Just a quick add-on, I know we're getting close to time, but the county, Fairfax County, I'm sure other counties, they braid funding. So that's another way to kind of just encourage more access, more opportunities to do more with funding. So like VPI and subsidy funding gets braided, and that's a way to offer full day VPI services in those community-based programs, as well as family childcare. And also the subsidy resources if you speak a language other than English, there is an English, a different language line. So our staff at the Child Care Resource and Referral can have a translator walk you through the process. Because as Emily said, there are a lot of steps. So we want to make sure families understand what each step really means and how do they go about that.
Yeah, and it seemed from reading about and talking to both of you about it that some of it is around marketing and information sharing. So part of that is making sure that different languages are available, but then also thinking about ways to reach out to communities where they're at. So Michelle from AART mentioned during her presentation that, why wouldn't a child growing up in affordable housing not qualify? And I'm sure that they do, but maybe there are some ways to increase access for kids in areas where that there's probably likely subsidy qualifications. So just really interesting things to think about how to market it better. So we're almost at time, and I wanted to ask both of you how those listening into this session, those reading the report, can lean into this issue. What are some ways that government, philanthropy, nonprofits, the business sector could start to get involved in starting to close that very sizable enrollment gap in Northern Virginia?
Well, I think no matter what sector you sit in, you can play a role. First, if you're here on the call, you're educating yourself. So that's definitely a great first step. And even those of us in the field are continuously educating ourselves to understand the challenges better and think through strategies. Each entity, we all have different unique perspectives. The business setting may have a different way of thinking through this challenge than government, but it doesn't mean that one is better than the other one has to put it all on its shoulders. So I think we just, having the conversation as a starting place, there are specific things like the philanthropic community. There is a need to fund more research in this space. So I really commend you all at Insight Region for tackling this challenge. So research really helps to drive future outcomes. So that is something I would encourage. And looking closely at things like the wages of educators and like turnover rates, I think that would be an interesting next potential project, especially as we come out of COVID. But yeah, getting involved and, partnering with local nonprofits like Fairfax Futures, going and trying to advocate, working with Voices to really have your voice heard. That's another great way to make positive change happen.
Yeah, and I'll just add, I think what you have here with the Insight Region and the research is really helpful to help frame the conversation. So keeping the feedback loop between the folks who are on the ground implementing the policies, the parents who are participating in the system, and the folks who are making the policy decisions, I think are really critical. So ensuring that there are these parent and provider opportunities to weigh in and build the system from the ground up, I think will be really helpful, as well as the ability to pilot and try new things, like supporting those family, friend, and neighbor networks and expanding our home-based networks. And so, of course, we'll ask you to advocate with us as well. This vision for ensuring that parents parents don't have to pay any more and providers don't earn any less will be an important part of our continuing conversation of the early childhood system. We're also part of the Virginia Promise Partnership and the Promise Plan that will be coming forward in the next month or so, where we'll hope that the state can achieve that vision in the long run. So there will be multiple opportunities to advocate at the state and local level, and to just keep a pulse of hearing folks like Tanya and Erin and ensuring that they are part of these solutions moving forward as well.
All right, so I want to be respectful of everybody's time here. It's already 2 minutes after 10, and I just want to say thank you to Elizabeth for another brilliant revelation here about where our region stands. Thank you to Emily and Sallyann so much for your insight and your participation on our panel. We really appreciate it. Thanks to all the representatives from All Ages Read Together, Michelle Sullivan and Main Street Child Development Center, Carol, and Infant Family Toddler Daycare, Tanya and Erin, and to our silver sponsor, Brown Advisory. And I just want to leave you all with this last thought. I feel that the biggest surprises with Insight Region are coming in when we not only understand what the data shows Northern Virginia, where Northern Virginia is, but where that data shows where we stand relative to the rest of the country. And Elizabeth has found data that says Northern Virginia is 49th out of 50 gateway metro areas across America for quality preschool uptake by low-income families. I think that factoid alone, speaks volumes about accessibility and affordability. The report also shows that we're 50 out of 50, the worst in the country, for the enrollment gap between low-income and high-income families. Needless to say, this is not good news. And we have a very great deal of work to do, in my opinion, for our low-income families, for their children, for raising awareness of our national standing on this data, and for figuring out ways together, right, as a community, to effectively address this huge need in our region. So thank you all for joining us today. We really appreciate your participation, your interest in these topics. And we will see you all again next time. Have a great day, everybody. Bye.
Thank you.